Welcome to this session on logical functions in Excel. Today we will explore powerful formulas like if, and, or, SUMIF and SUMIFS. These functions help us make decisions, filter data and perform conditional calculations. Whether you are analyzing sales data or creating dynamic reports or maybe automating some tasks, mastering these functions will make your Excel skills to the next level. So let's get started. Imagine you're working at a school and the management has tasked you with reviewing students' results to determine whether each student has passed or failed. The school has set a grading criteria that any student who scores 70 or above is considered to have passed, otherwise they have failed. Now if you had 500 students, manually assessing each result would be time consuming and it can be prone to errors due to the volume of data. This is where the if function in Excel becomes useful, allowing you to automate the process, generate accurate results in seconds, and ensure 100% precision. So let's explore how to use this powerful function. So as we know, all the formulas in Excel start with an equal sign, and then if we start typing the name of our formula, since we're using if, so we'll start typing if, and then either if I double click on it, will automatically put a bracket, or I can just put the bracket myself. Now let's look at the structure of the formula. So the first question the formula is asking us, what is the logical test you want to do? Now we know that the condition is that if somebody has scored 70 or above, they have passed, and if they have scored less than 70, they have failed. That is the condition. So this is our logical test. Now, where is the value that we want to see that has crossed that passing point, or let's call it passing mark? So this final mark is what we are looking at. So this mark here should be greater than or equal to 70 for us to call the student a pass, otherwise they failed. Or if I put it the other way around to make it easier, if they have scored less than 70, they have failed. So we'll select the point where the value is, and we will put the less than sign, and we will say 70. So if this mark or the value in this cell E3 is less than 70, then what do we want the computer to give us? So let's put a comma to go to our next part of the logical test. So if I put the comma, we will move to the next one. Now the Excel is asking us value if true. So what exactly do we want to see there if the final mark of that individual student, Steve, are less than 70? So the school has told us if it is less than 70, it should be a fail. So I'll write a fail, and then we'll put a comma. And what should be the value if the condition is not met? Which means if it is not less than 70, it is 70 or above, then we should see a pass. Now remember, if I was just putting the numbers, I should be fine here. I can put 0 and 1. So let's say fail is 0, pass is 1. That should be fine. But since we are putting text as an output, we always put the text in the parentheses in the inverted comma. So I'll put inverted commas just before and after fail, as it is a text, and I'll also put inverted commas just before pass and just at the end of pass, since it is a text. And then I'll close our logic. Now that is the condition that we have put. If the marks in that E3 cell are less than 70, this person has failed, otherwise they have passed. Now let's hit enter and see. Now this person has passed since they have scored more than 70. Now let's drag that formula down to all the students that we have, 100, 200, or even 500. It would just take a few seconds to drag. So we can see 3 students have failed because they did not achieve the required passing marks 70. So we can see Joy 62 failed, Jen 44 failed, and Sandy 68 failed. Now imagine if you had 500 or maybe 1000 students that you had to give this passing criteria. It could take probably a few hours to give them these pass or fail criteria. But with the help of this if function, which takes about a minute to write the formula, and if we just drag it down, it takes a few seconds to mark all these students. Right, now let's get to the next point where we will start integrating multiple conditions. So in Excel, we have the option to combine multiple conditions into one logical statements. And if we want some of them to be met or all of them to be met, we use different formulas such as and, or, or. So if you have multiple conditions and you want to see a specific value based on if all the conditions are met, we use AND function, which means we want condition 1 to be met and also the condition 2 to be met. And if we want only one of the conditions to be met for us to get the final outcome, we use OR to find if either of the condition has met. So let's look into the next criteria. Now let's assume the school management has changed the criteria for pass or fail, and they have introduced something new called two components of the final marks, which means now to decide if somebody has passed or failed, we're not only going to look at the final marks, which we saw in this case here, in our first example here. Now the management has decided that on top of the final marks, we will also have to see the individual components, which means that each individual had a total of 100 marks, and out of those 100, 50 marks were allocated to the assignments and 50 marks were allocated to the final exam. Now the condition is that in order to pass, yes, the individual must achieve this 70 or above to pass as the final mark, but they must also pass the individual components, which means they must achieve 30 or above in each of the components as well, and 70 and above in the as a total final mark, which means that if a student has scored 71 or above as a final grade with our previous criteria, they were a pass. But if they have failed to pass both components individually, even though they have passed, they've scored 70 and above as a final mark, they would be a fail with the new criteria. So let's get started. Again, we'll start our formula with an equal sign if. Now, as we have multiple conditions and we want to see if those conditions are met or not, we'll have to decide if we want to use AND or function. Now, we can use both in this case, and I will give you both examples one by one. Let's start with and then we'll test the same formula, same criteria with OR function. So let's use AND to see how it works. Now, if you remember, I said we use AND function when all the conditions are met for a specific result or specific outcome. So here we've got three conditions. So the school has decided that for a student to pass, they must get 30 or above in their assignments. They must get 50 or above, 30 or above in their final exam out of 50, and they must get a total of 70 or above in the final mark to be considered as a pass. So there are three conditions. Condition 1, assignment, 30 or above. Condition 2, exam marks, 30 or above. And condition 3, final marks 70 or above. So all three conditions need to meet in order for a person to be considered a pass. So let's do those conditions one by one. Let's write those, let's translate that, what I just said, into a formula. So first thing I said was the assignment marks, which are here in this cell C14, they should be greater than or equal to 30. The second logic is, if I press the comma, it'll ask second logic. The second logic is the exam marks, which are in D14. They must be greater than or equal to 30. And the third logic is the final mark, which is in E14, sorry. That should be greater than or equal to 70. These are the three conditions we have. If we have more conditions, we can continue going. Look at it. So we have logic 1, logic 2, 3, 4, we can continue. But since we have only three conditions, assignments 30 or above, exam marks 30 or above, and final marks 70 above. These are the only three conditions. Now, let's close those conditions, and let's see what is the next part of the formula. The next part of the formula is value if true. What do we want to see if all these three conditions are met? Now, since we know that if the criteria 1 of assignment 30 and above is met, criteria 2, 30 and above, criteria 3, 70 or above is met, that means this individual has passed. So we'll put a pass again, because it's a text, we'll put in inverted commas, and then we'll put comma to see the value if false. So what do we want to see if either of the conditions is not met? For example, if the person did not get 30 or above in assignment, what do we want to see? A fail. Now let's close our bracket and hit enter. So the first person has passed. Let's drag it down. Now if you pay attention, in our previous exercise, which is the exact same copy of the one that we're working on, we had three individuals that failed. So let's look at this. So we had these two and this. But if you pay attention now, one person, Janet, that passed with the previous criteria, since she had 70 or above, she passed with the previous criteria, but she failed with the new criteria, even though she scored more than 70 as a final mark, but she failed. And you know why? The reason is here. Even though she got the final marks above 70 and she passed the exam, which is above 30, but since she did not score 30 or above in the assignments, she has failed overall, because now the school management has decided that in order for somebody to pass, not only they have to achieve the final marks 70 or above, they must also pass the individual components, which is assignments and exam. So the passing mark for each is 30 or above. Since this person did not pass the assignments component, even though they crossed the 70 passing mark as overall, they have failed due to this new criteria. So that's the AND function that we've used. So we can find the exact same values by using the OR function. So we'll have to just reverse the function. So let's do that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put these results as values on the side for us to compare later, that if our formula with OR has resulted the same outcome. So again, we'll start the formula with F. And this time, since we have decided that we'll use an OR function, so we will start with OR. Now, what are the logics? Again, we have three logics. If the value here is less than 30, the value in this exam is less than 30, or the final marks are less than 70, what should we see? If either of these conditions is met, which means if a person has either scored less than 30 in their assignment or scored less than 30 in their final exam, or overall marks are less than 70, we already know that means the person has failed. So if any of these conditions is met, we want to see fail. Otherwise, we want to see pass. So let's hit enter to see. Now, let's drag it down and compare the results. So we have a fail here. You can see here exactly the same. We have a fail here, and we have these two failed here. So whether we use AND or OR function, in both cases we've got the same results because the conditions are exactly the same. So in one we said if all the conditions are met, then it's pass. And then in the other one we said if any of the condition is not met, they're failed. So that's exactly what we did. If their assignment marks are less than 30, or their exam marks are less than 30, or their overall marks are less than 70, that means they've failed. Otherwise, they've passed. Right? Now, let's make this criteria a little bit more complicated. Right? So now the school has given you the instructions that we don't only want to see the pass or fail based on this latest criteria. We also want to give some grading. So not just pass. Imagine 71 passed, 99 passed. There has to be something to distinguish between the grades, that who passed with flying colors, who has achieved high grades. So the management has decided that instead of just putting a pass or fail, we want to see individuals that have taken a distinction, or who have passed with a merit, or who have just passed. So the management has decided three brackets. They say anybody that has scored below is a fail. Anybody that scores 70 and 79 inclusive, so between 70 and 79, so 70, 71, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they are passed. Anybody that has scored 80 and up to 89, including 89, they will get a grade merit. And anybody that has scored 90 or above, they will be getting a distinction. So now, we don't just have to decide a pass or fail, we have to include these other conditions as well. So let's do that. Now we can do that by using or by using and, both things. But let's start with using or. So let's do that. Now what I can do is I can copy the exact formula to start working on, right? So let's do that. Let me just copy that formula from there. Here we go. So I've copied that formula. But since in this case, we do not only want to see pass, we want to see the pass, merit, or distinction grading as well. So let's work on this formula to make it a bit more complicated, and let's understand how do we do those steps. Now, since the first part of the formula, it's still the same. The only difference in this case would be that we want to see if somebody has passed, what grade they have achieved, if they're just passed or they have achieved merit or a distinction. Because if either of the first three conditions is not met, then they are obviously fail. The only difference here is the pass would be converted into a grade, either just pass or a merit or a distinction. So let's change that part and let's integrate multiple conditions to see if they failed, that's it. If they're passed, what they have achieved. So let's add more conditions. If the final mark is greater or equal to 90, that means they have achieved a distinction. And if that final mark is greater or equal to 80, that means they have achieved the merit. And if that final mark is greater or equal to 70, that means they have passed. Otherwise, they have failed. Otherwise, it's a fail. Now let's start closing these brackets. Since we have opened 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll have to close 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's hit enter. So 83, which bracket does this fall in? In this bracket. So they should have a merit. Now let's drag it down. They failed since they could not achieve the 30 or above marks in the assignment, so fail. Now here we see a merit. Again, that's 83. Fail because it's less than 70. Pass because that is between 70 and 79. So that's a pass. We've got a pass grade here. Failed below 70, failed below 70, and distinction because it is above 90. So that individual has got a distinction. So now in this example, we did not just want to see the pass or fail by having multiple conditions, but on top of those multiple conditions, we wanted to see the multiple outcomes. So that's why we used this complicated formula, or we call them nested if formulas, because we have combined a lot of conditions into one formula. Now let's look at the other if functions commonly used in day-to-day life. So we're going to look at COUNTIF and SUMIF. Now, what is COUNTIF? Basically, COUNTIF counts the number of cells that meet a specific condition. For example, if I want to see in our inventory that how many BMW cars we have in inventory, or we can use COUNTIFs for the multiple conditions if we want to see more than one condition being applied. For example, not just how many BMWs we've got in the inventory, but how many red color BMWs we've got. So there are two conditions. One, we want to see the total number of BMWs in the inventory, and in specific, just the red, not blue, not green, not black, just the red. So we use the count ifs in that case. And then the other formula, which is SUMIFS, basically that sums up the values in a given range. It adds up the values in a range based on a given condition. Again, if I want to see what is the total value of the BMW cars in our inventory, I would use SUMIF. But if I want to use multiple conditions, then not only just the BMW cars, but red BMWs in specific, what is the total value of that inventory? Now we've got two conditions, so in that case we will use SUMIFS. So let's see how do we use these conditions. So let's start from the easy one. We'll start from the COUNTIF, and then we'll do COUNTIFs, and then we'll go for SUMIF and then SUMIFs. So let's start from the counter. So again, equal COUNTIF. So Excel is asking us, where is the range that you want to look for? Now we know that this is the range where we want to see the number of BMWs we've got in the inventory. Now if I put a comma, it says, what is the criteria? Now what do I want to look for in that range? What am I looking for? I'm looking for how many times the BMW was repeated in that series, how many BMW cars we've got in the inventory. Now since BMW is a text, again we'll put into the inverted commas and I'll hit enter. It says 8. We can verify that by just putting a filter, which is our normal traditional way of filtering the data, and I'll select BMW and let's see how many we've got. Here we go. At the bottom you can see here 8. So that's the correct answer. But now we don't want to only see the total number of BMWs in the inventory. We also want to see how many red BMWs we've got in stock. So we will, instead of using count if, now we will use count ifs since we have multiple conditions, because the first condition was the make of the car, and then the second condition is the color of the car. So we'll say count ifs. Now it's saying again, what is the criteria range? The range remains the same. What is, so if I put a comma, the second question is asking is, what is the criteria one? What am I looking for in that range? So we know we're looking for BMW in that range. Now if I press comma, it's asking me what is the range of the second criteria. Now what are we looking for? We're looking for the color. Where is that range? Where are the colors mentioned? Here is the range. We're looking for the color in this range. And if I put a comma, the next question it asks is, what is the criteria? So what exactly do we want to see in that range? Again, we want to see red. And let's close the formula and hit enter. It says 3. Now let's check. So we saw that total BMWs were 8, which I can see here. These are 8. But let's see how many are red. So let's click on that. And we can see 3. And that is exactly what we've got here. So we've got 8 BMWs, but there are 3 only in red color in our inventory, right? Now, let's look at the sum functions. Now, before we look at the sum function, I would like to emphasize here, while writing the formula, if you make a spelling mistake, the formula will not work. Now, imagine you have a long list of all these cars with difficult names. Now, if you're putting the formula and you are writing them manually, there are chances that you will get it wrong. For example, if I say I want to see how many Volkswagen we have in red color in inventory, and if I hit enter, it says 0. But that might not be the case. Let's check. So let's look at that. Let's go to Volkswagen and let's look at the red colors. The inventory says we've got 1 car in the inventory. Now my formula says 0. The reason why, because I misspelled Volkswagen, and this is why the system did not give me any result, because it could not look for that specific item in the inventory. So in order to avoid these mistakes, it's always a good idea to make a unique list of all the products or services within your business so that we don't have to individually manually type them, and we use a pick list to avoid these kind of mistakes. So let's learn how to do that. So I'm just going to remove the filter, and we're going to learn something new here. It's called making a pick list in Excel. It's a very useful thing, and you'll be using them probably on a regular basis in your day-to-day work, and it can make your a lot of tasks easier by doing so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these brands that we have here, all the makes. I'm going to take them on a separate position within the worksheet, and I'm going to select all of them, and I'm going to say remove duplicates. Now, these are the unique values we found so far. We can use these unique values to create a list here. So let's learn how do we do that. To do that, we'll click on data validation. Again, data validation. Under allow, we'll click on the option list since we want to make a list. And it says, where is the source? And here it is. We can select all of them and then click OK. We've got a list here. So let's look at that. Here we've got all the options. Now, if I say BMW, let's use the same formula, is equal to count if. What's the range? The range remains the same. What is our criteria? The criteria is now, instead of me writing in those inverted commas, I will just select this since the value is here. This is the value we're looking for, and I'll close it. And here we've got the answer. Now, let me just remove that. All right, now if I change this to, I don't know, Audi, it says 4. Let's confirm. So we'll just put a filter again to see how many Audis we've got in the stock. So here it is. It's right, it's 4. Now, if you remember, when I was using the example of Volkswagen and I spelled it wrong, now I don't have to worry. I'll just simply go there and I'll pick from here. It says there are 4 Volkswagens in the inventory. Let's check. How many do we have? We've got 4. Let's look at, I don't know, Porsche. We've got 6. Here we go. We've got 6. Now let's combine the multiple conditions. And let's learn the SUMIF formula and SUMIFS. So let's start from this SUMIF formula and then we'll combine it to SUMIFS. So let's say equal SUMIF with a single condition at the moment. We want to see the total value of all the Porsche cars in our inventory, for example. So we'll say this is the range. In this range, find this specific make. Yep, this is the criteria. And give us the total value of inventory wherever we have a corresponding car make of this brand. So let's close it. That's the total value in our inventory. Now let's put a filter to check. Let's do a total of that. And here at the bottom, you can see 229,900. Now I don't want to put a filter all the time at the, and then check at the bottom by selecting the total value. So let's put a formula here that can give us the total with filter. So because we want to see a sum, and here is the range. Let's click OK. Right. So again, let's try a different one now. Let's say what is the total value of the inventory of Audi cars we have? 80,000 it says. Let's go there. Let's pick Audis. And here it says 80,970, which matches with that. Let's see if our formula is working fine. Let's see Toyota. We've got 69,410 pounds worth of Toyota cars in our inventory. Let's check that. Yeah, the formula is working fine. Now let's make it more complicated by adding the multiple conditions. We don't want to just see the sum, the total inventory value of Toyota, for example. We want to see how many black Toyotas we have in the inventory and what is the value of those. So this time we want to have obviously the car make, and another condition is the color. So again, in this time I'm gonna take that list, get unique values out of it. Right, let's do the same thing, and let's say remove duplicates, and we want to continue with the current selection only. And here we've got 6 unique values, and let's make a list based on that here. Again, data validation. I'm going slightly faster this time because we've done that process already. Here we go, and click OK, and we've got it here. So we've got the conditions here, right? So what were we looking for example, here? So we were looking for Toyotas, and we wanted to see black color, for example. So let's say is equal to some ifs. In fact, I will remove the filters for you to first see the full range and then apply the formula. Right, so let's do it here. Is equal to some ifs What is the sum range? Where do we want to add the values from? Here are the values. We want this range to be added up. Right. What is the criteria range 1? Where is the first criteria? That's the first criteria, the make, and this is the range. And what do we want to see in that criteria? We want to see this value. What is the range criteria 2? The color. And where have we defined that specific color? Here. Right, 2 conditions only. Let's close it, enter. We missed something. Yep, the criteria 2. So here we go. So we've got the sum, we've got the criteria 1, we've got the criteria 2. Let's do it all over. I might have messed it up. So let's do it one more time. SUMIFS. Where is the range to sum? Here, this is the range to sum. Then criteria range 1. That is the range of our first criteria. Then it's asking what is the first criteria. Here is the first criteria. What is the criteria range 2? Here is the criteria range 2. What is the criteria 2? Here is the criteria 2. Let's close it. Enter. It's worked fine. Right. So let's test now. We want to see how many BMWs. So for example, total value of the BMWs first. And then the red BMWs, for example. So BMWs red. Right. So let's put our filter to test if the formula is working fine. So let's see the total value of BMWs first. Here it says 146,330, which is fine, it matches. And if we want to see the value of only red BMWs in the inventory, here it says 62,180, which matches with this one here. So that means our filters are working fine, our formula is working fine, and everything looks okay. So that's how you use the SUMIF and COUNTIF formulas with one condition and COUNTIFs and SUMIFs with multiple conditions. You can add as many conditions as you like.